Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. And I just finished filming my Games Leaving the Collection video for September. And that video is not actually up yet. It should probably be going up in a few days. Wibbly wobbly, timey-wimey, all of that. But it made me think about something that I've had this request for a video in the past, and I decided to finally do it, which is games that will never leave your collection. You probably already know that. You already clicked on the title. The title probably says something along those lines, but it's 10 games that will never leave my collection. And to be very clear, that is not a guarantee. Not in the slightest. And that's one of the reasons I've held off of doing this video for so long. When asked about it in the past by people, what are games that will never leave? And the answer is very few things are permanently safe. Things that have stood the test of time again and again and again have left. Things have been staples. Things have been in my top 10, but time moves on, and sometimes you get bored of a game that's amazing. Sometimes the mechanics play themselves out. Sometimes you find something that replaces it. Games aren't safe, at least not for me, but these 10 games are mostly safe. And no, it's not my top 10 games of all time. It's not the same thing in the slightest. There's overlap. I think there's at least 2, maybe 3 from my top 10 in here. But it's not the top 10 list, because the top 10 list is what are my favorite games right here and now. This is a slightly different aspect to looking at a collection. This is an aspect of looking at a list of games and trying to think through, are they going to stay forever? And it's usually a combination of a few different things. Usually that means the game has to have a lot of variability in it. Whether the base game itself or the expansions I have, if it has a lot of variability, that adds to the fact that it will likely still remain fresh time and time again. If it's stayed in my collection for a long time already, that's also a good sign. A game that's been in my collection for a year, I still need more time, although there's at least one here that still made the list. But games that have stood in my collection for 4, 5, 10 years, well, nothing's stood in my collection for 10 years, 4, 5, 8, 9 years, that's more likely because that's lasted that long and still manages to maintain its place in my collection. Another factor is going to be, and again, not true for all these games, but a game that's good at multiple player counts and or situations is often more likely to stay. Games that are only good at 5 players, they're just a little more restrictive, and it means it's competing with every other game that's only good with 5 players. A game that's good at 3, 4, and 5 players, more chances it'll hit the table and therefore more chances it'll stay. And then lastly, games that are often played by multiple people in my groups. Whether it's a game that can be played solo, that's often a factor. If I can play a game solo, that definitely helps. Or if a game is enjoyed by both my wife and people in my game group, that's going to be better than just my wife, just my game group, just by the very nature of, if it's something that I only play with a certain type of person, then it's less likely to be guaranteed, especially if that person is no longer playing that game with me. So those are primarily the things I'm looking at as I go through this. And with that, let's start off with the 3 that didn't make this list. And yes, there are 3 that didn't make this list. There are 3 specific games that I love, that I adore, that I think are incredible, that every single time I play them, I want to play them again, and yet they're not on this list and I don't have a firm answer why. And the first one is going to be Too Many Bones. And yes, I'm taking this because the alternative is trying to lug the giant trove chest onto my table and put it down. Now, Too Many Bones is one of my favorite games in my collection. Top 50 material for sure. I don't know exactly where it is. I'd have to check, or I'll have to reorder my list for 2021. But Too Many Bones is one of the 3 games that did not make its way into this list. The next one's going to be Spirit Island. And yes, I'm going to talk about these in a second, but I want to put them all on the table first. Spirit Island, which I will not hold this way for long because it's got like tokens and certain things. That's the second game that did not make its way to the list. I'll move that over here actually. And then the third one is going to be Marvel Champions. Marvel Champions, which I have 2 giant boxes full of cards and more expansions to come. All 3 of these games have a few things in common actually. And I don't know for sure why they're not on this list, but I will talk it through. All I know for sure is when I was putting them on my list, these 3, I was like, I'm not willing to give it a guarantee. Not that any of these are a guarantee. Again, we've covered that. But I'm not even willing to say that it's a guarantee, even as I acknowledge that little asterisk of not actual guarantee, money back, blah, blah, blah. What do these 3 games have in common? You may have already figured out. So to begin with, all of these 3 games can be played incredibly well solo. All these 3 games are cooperative games. They're all good solo, good with 2 players. They start getting a little iffy at higher player counts. I personally don't like Marvel Champions with more than 2. Willing to play it at 3, but not my preference. Too Many Bones, same issue. I like it at 1 and 2. Willing to play it at 3, not my preference. Spirit Island, I'm a little bit more tolerable at 3. 1 and 2 still my preference. 3's good, and 4 is where I start moving into the willing to play, but it has a little bit more wiggle room in that. All of them are cooperative, all of them are good at multiple player counts, all of them are good solo, all of them have a ton of variability, especially because I've, well, gotten everything for them. I have everything for Spirit Island, I have much more content than I've ever gone through. Too Many Bones, I have more content than I can ever imagine going through, and there's more on the way with Too Many Bones Unbreakable. Coming to GameFound October 19th, 18th, 19th, I think October 19th. And then we have Marvel Champions with a ton of variability, more than I will ever need based on the way I currently experience it. And all three of these games basically check the boxes I told you about, and all three of them have been in my collection for some time now. Marvel Champions is going to be the most recent, with roughly 2 years under my belt. Spirit Island, I think it's coming in around 3 years in my collection so far. And Too Many Bones is somewhere in the same zone as well. So they've definitely stood the test of time to a degree. And yet I don't know what it is about them. See, Spirit Island was the one that I was most willing to consider, but here's where my thoughts were as far as why I don't know if they're going to stay in my collection forever, even though I think they are all amazing. And again, I think they'll be in my collection, it's just not my top 10 list here. Too Many Bones can be a beast to set up at times, and learning every single character can be a new journey. And you don't always remember it, which means the biggest hurdle of Too Many Bones is if you're not playing it frequently, it can sit by the wayside unplayed, and that does mean that when I look at it, as much as I love it, there's a small part of me that's like, one day, I might look at my entire Too Many Bones collection and say, I love you, but I'm just not playing you. That's possible. It's a game that I don't play as often as I'd like, and that can be a factor. Now, Marvel Champions has the same thing, but to a lesser extent. Too Many Bones, to be clear, is the one I'm least certain will stay in my collection. Although, still, again, none of these games are actually leaving, to be clear. Just talking about guarantees. Marvel Champions is going to be a tier down in the fact that it's much easier to jump back in having not played in a while, because you don't have to learn every single new character by reading an entire new set of rules. A quick refresher on the core mechanics. I could not play this game for 6 months, and I could dive back in with like 5 minutes of prep. Too Many Bones, if I don't play in 6 months, I need like 30, 40 minutes of prep to get my head back in the game. But Marvel Champions, I can jump back in pretty quickly, but the amount of content on it, I have this weird fear that as I get more and more content for this game, as I continue to build up my collection, I may, through my own desire to have it all, I may make this game harder and harder to table. And there's a part of me that's afraid. I'm not willing to not get the new stuff, to be clear. I want the new cards, I want the new characters, I want to keep diving into it. But there's a small part of me that worries that the more content I have, it might eventually hit this weird unplayed zone. And Spirit Island is a little different. Spirit Island is a different reason for that one, because even though the games share a lot of similarities, they all have slightly different nuanced reasons to them. Spirit Island is actually pretty easy to jump into every single time, and I play it frequently enough that I could really just get up and going, read a new Spirit, boom, I'm ready to go. I don't have to make a new deck, I don't have to do any of that. Something about Spirit Island is, though, as much as I love the puzzle every single time, there is a small part of me that feels the mechanics are repetitive. Now, I say that as someone who has not played with the Branch and Claw expansion or the Jagged Earth expansion, so from that stance, this game should be safe. But having not played with those, I'm also not as confident. I would say this is the only one of these three that had a strong chance of actually being in my top 10 games that will never, ever, ever leave my collection. No guarantees. And with that, let's go ahead and jump into the actual list of games now that we've talked about the 3 games that are not on the list. It's been a Board Game Co. list used to always have extra games on them. They haven't in a while, but now they're back. And we're going to start off, for the most part, this is ordered from the most likely to leave my collection to least likely, even though they're all guaranteed to not. But either way, starting off the bat with Santorini, which is a game that is almost certainly never leaving my collection. I've had this game for something like 6 years now, and it does violate one of my rules already, which is it's a game that I'm primarily going to play at 2 players. There are 3 and 4 player modes. I've never tried the 3 and 4 player modes. It's not the way I imagine myself wanting to play what effectively is a 2-player head-to-head abstract game. But Santorini has lasted for a long time. It's not a game I always pull out, but it's a game I'm always happy to play, and every single time I play, I have no regrets, and I do play it with multiple people, ranging from my daughter to my wife to my friends. It's a game that manages to satisfy at all different player counts, because it's a simple abstract that is remarkably tense and tight as it plays, and yet the variability from the different gods, I still have not played through all the characters here, because the way I play this game is every few months I pull it out, and I randomly shuffle the cards, hand 2 cards, and the combination presents the puzzle, and then usually I swap cards and go head to head to see if one person can effectively achieve a victory, making sure it's not the character that was stronger, but rather the player that was playing better. But it's a game, and by the way, just for context, the last 2 times I played this game, my daughter beat me, so just so we're clear, it's not about me showing who's better, not in the slightest. But either way, Santorini is a game that has the core gameplay is fairly simple. I was looking at the games on my shelf in terms of an abstract for this list, and TAC almost made this list, but TAC arguably can be more repetitive, whereas Santorini introduces that variability that mixes it up every single time. Now, this list, to be very clear, only has games that are final production copies of games. There are no prototypes or anything else in my list, or Mythic Mischief may have given Santorini a run for its money in terms of possibly replacing it. Although Mythic Mischief I need more time with. I've only had a few short months with Mythic Mischief as opposed to 6 years. But either way, that's going to be my number 10 is going to be Santorini, and my number 9 is going to be the big box that is Vindication. Now, Vindication satisfies a variety of the things I've talked about already. It is good at multiple player counts. It's good at 2, 3, and 4 players. Possibly not as good at 2, but very good at 3 and 4. The variability is through the roof. The amount of expansion content I have is absolutely... I haven't even felt the need to dive into it. I have so much content for this game, and I'm still interested. I still enjoy diving into it. The playtime makes it fairly accessible, coming in at roughly 90 minutes, tops 2 hours for the game, which makes it a fairly accessible playtime as well, which is a big factor in almost every game that made this list. Almost every game that made this list is something that does have a shorter playtime. I did say almost. But that's going to go to the fact that Vindication is just delightful, it's variable, it's good at multiple player counts. I wonder if it's 100% safe. I do. My biggest fear is that the people I'm playing with won't like it as much as I do, because I already have that problem with my game group where there are certain people in my game group who love this game, and then there are certain people in my game group who are like, not when I'm there. And that does make Vindication slightly harder to table. Vindication, the reason it's higher on this list, which means it's less likely to stay, is because of the fact that it's not always been a hit with everyone I've played it with, and that can remove from its, it can take away from its guaranteed ability to stay. Number 8 in my collection over here is going to be... I'm trying to think which way to go here in terms of... It's a general ordering. Let's go with Everdell for my number 8. Now, Everdell is a game that has a ton of content to it, a ton of variability, specifically, to be clear, with the fact that I own every single expansion for this game, and I have the Collector's Edition and all the expansion content there coming in as well. Everdell is a game that is amazingly rewarding, plays well at 2 and 3 players, 4 can run a little long, it's not the worst. I believe it has a solo mode, which I should probably try eventually, although I believe the new Kickstarter Collector's Edition is coming with the solo mode as well, so maybe I'll wait till that happens. But it's a game that I really enjoy the tableau building. I really enjoy the worker placement puzzle of how and why and what you're going to do. And the expansions keep it very, very variable. It is beautiful. It is rewarding. It's been in my collection for a few years now. It's a game that at one point I played and got rid of, but then I got it back and have not stopped saying good things about Everdell. Everdell is a game that I anticipate it never leaving my collection. Although, again, there's no guarantee. I'm going to keep saying that to everything. There's no guarantees. Nothing is safe forever. Nothing is safe forever. But this Marvel United might shock you. I should say that. I should just like title this video like number 7 will shock you. I'm probably going to try to throw that in somewhere if I could. The title might be too long, but number 7 will shock you. The fact that Marvel United is on this list shocks me. Marvel United is a game that I have said, if not for the theme, it would not be in my collection. It is a game that I have because of the theme, not because of the mechanics. The mechanics are okay. But the game's too light, it's too abstracted, it's not rewarding enough. The theme is what makes it special. The theme is what works together with a solidly accessible game. But here's why I think this one will stay forever. I just pull this out with everyone. Everyone. It's not my favorite game. It's not even remotely. I think it's a 4. I'm pretty sure it's a 4. I'd give it a 4 to 5 for me in terms of like, I like it. It's not a 5. In fact, it might be, I'm not going to rate the games here. I'm pretty sure they're mostly 5s here. They're mostly 5s. This is this is the lowest ranked game in this, being a 3.5 that I round up to a 4 because it's close enough. But Marvel United is a solid game. But it's a game where the theme is really what's driving it, and the variability keeps it fresh. I have all the content. I have all Marvel United X-Men coming, and that's a ton of content for this game. But it's a game that I pull out with anyone. It's a game that with gamers, with non-gamers, with kids, with spouses, with anyone, if we just want to knock out half an hour, I'm like, oh great, boom, here are some characters, here's a boss, boom, let's just go ahead and play cards, and ooh, look at that, I contribute to fight, and look at that, okay, you rescue those 2 people, look at us working together, accomplish things, saving the world. It's accessible. It is accessible, it has a theme that has taken over the world. I mean, the MCU is the biggest intellectual property we have seen since who knows what. I mean, you can make arguments about Star Trek, Harry Potter. I don't think anything rivals the MCU in the size and scope of what it has done in the world, in the universe. Marvel puts out a movie and it crosses $1 billion almost guaranteed, and that means this game has a theme that will appeal to a lot of people. I mean, this shirt that I'm wearing is not a coincidence. It wasn't for this video. It's just, I have WandaVision gear because why not? And everyone likes the theme of Marvel United. Everyone enjoys playing as the characters. It's not the most rewarding game, not by a long shot. But it gets a lot of points having done a lot of things well. And because of who and how I will play this game, I don't know when it would leave. Next up, at this point I don't really have... Let's go with this one, the one on the floor over here. Next up, number 6. Number 6. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Number 6 is going to be Aquatica. Aquatica is going to be the newest game on this list. Marvel United comes close, I guess, but Marvel United has still been there for a decent amount of time. Aquatica is going to be the newest game on this list, and this was a game that I loved it when I first played it. That's not true. I really liked my first play, and my second play kind of locked it in, and my third, fourth, and fifth and subsequent plays have continued to lock it in. It's a game that has a solo mode, which helps. It's a game that plays well at 2 and 3 players. At 4 is not my favorite player count, but I'm absolutely willing to play it at 4. It still plays quickly enough, and the market becomes a bit tighter in terms of trying to gather those cards. It's got a fun little puzzle of trying to get a little bit of tableau building in terms of building up your hand, the building up your mantas, but ultimately it's all about playing cards in certain sequences, finding the little connections of how you're going to build, which regions on the board you're going to attack or buy in order to slide them up into tableau, and then use them to figure out which scoring objectives are going to combine. It has a lot of things going for it. And it has the expansion in it. I want more expansion content, to be clear. But even so, the base game and expansion give you 2 different ways to play, both of which I'm happy to experiment with, both of which I'm happy to try. Gives you a ton of variability in the various scoring objectives and goals. Again, that puzzle is going to be different every single time. There's variability in which cards are in play every single time. For me, the biggest thing I want is more variability. Not necessarily more mechanics. I'll take more mechanics. But more variability is the thing that I am slightly concerned, because the age of how long this has been in my collection of Aquatica, it's been maybe a year now. Maybe a year since I got it. That does mean that, sure, I've played it like 9 or 10 times, but that's not a ton. Maybe plays 19 through 20 are going to kill it for me and make it boring. So I do have that strike against it of just not having enough longevity to know whether another 10 plays has me bored. But I don't think so. Because it's on this list, obviously, I don't think so. Next up, we're going to go with Blood Rage. Blood Rage, which is, spoiler, my number 2 game of all time for this year. Coming up in 2021, when I do my top 50 games of all time, or top 100, I don't even know what I'm going to do, but Blood Rage will be my number 2 game of all time. And this list is number 5, because, again, this list is not about what's my favorite stuff. This list is about, is that 2 Command games? 2 Command games on this list. That almost, by the way, fun fact, spoiler for the rest of this list, Zombicide, I did put on this list at first, but I took it off. Because Zombicide, I really enjoy it. And there's more about Zombicide, this genre. Like the fact that I'll have a Zombicide game in my collection forever. But I took it off because I'm actually not confident I will. I love Zombicide. I do. But I can see myself getting bored of it. I can see myself getting bored of Black Plague and not having a new one that's ever better. And eventually, not today, not tomorrow, but maybe 5 years from now, I move on from Zombicide. So I'm less confident there. But either way, Blood Rage. Blood Rage is my number 5 on this list. And it's my number 5 because as good as it is, first of all, to be very clear, by the way, if I get rid of Blood Rage and because I replace it with Blood Rage 2, that does not count as leaving my collection. And that's true for any of these. If I ever replace one of these with a newer version, that counts as the game staying, okay? We obviously, whatever, it's all good. Point is, Blood Rage, while I might replace it with Blood Rage 2 when eventually does come out, they've come on as hinted or teased at it multiple times. There should be something along the lines of a Blood Rage 2 at some point. But Blood Rage is a game that I love the experience of it. The variability, though, because of how much I've played Blood Rage, I do wonder. Looking back at Aquatica, Aquatica is a game that the difference between 10 plays and 20 plays could be high, and that's definitely something that's true with Blood Rage. Blood Rage 10 plays in, I still loved it to death. Blood Rage 20 plays in, I started to feel like I've seen a lot more of the content. Now, the new Kickstarter that came out recently, the digital Steam Blood Rage, whatever, that came with their own little extras, that definitely helped add to the variability. It definitely helped keep the puzzle a little fresher now that I have a little bit more going on. I still kind of want the option for asymmetric clan upgrades or something. Again, that would give me a reason to dive into different clans and try different combinations and experiences. Could potentially break the game, which is the obvious problem with it. But I want more variability for my Blood Rage experience. That's the only reason it's lower on my list. I am slightly concerned that as I continue to play it, eventually just the sheer amount of plays I have of it under my belt will have it as a game that I've seen it all. There's only so many ways you can play locally strategies. There's only so many times you can get Odin's Throne and use it with a variety of quests to win the game. There's only so many different times you can go for any number of the combinations of the game. Although, even as I say that, whenever I dive back into it, I often do try doing something new, and very often I'm rewarded for that. So there's a lot of life left in Blood Rage. I just don't know if there's an infinite amount of life left in Blood Rage. Although again, if Blood Rage 2 does come out, and I get that, that will put a brand new reset button on that, and still counting it as Blood Rage in my collection. Next up, now I'm trying to think which way to go. Let's go with Cyclades. Cyclades is going to be my number 4. Cyclades is a game that I love this game. And yes, it's lower on my list than Blood Rage in terms of my sheer rankings, but in terms of games that I think will stay forever, Cyclades is high up there. In fact, when I was putting together this list, it was the second game that I added to the list. I started going through my top 50 games of all time, trying to find them. I don't think I had to go outside my top 50. I think Marvel United was the only one that might have been outside it, but I immediately put down one game, and then my second game that I put on the list was Cyclades, because Cyclades is a game that no other area control game feels quite like it. I have complaints against it. I've reviewed it a while ago on the channel. I have complaints, I have concerns, aspects of why I want to criticize certain things from it. But number one, it has a ton of variability to it, especially because I have all the expansion content. I have Titans, I have Hades, I don't even know what else they have. I have basically everything that I could think of. The only one I don't really like is the Monuments expansion. I'm not a fan of that. I think I still own it though. But overall, Cyclades offers a delightful experience of area control and bidding, and the combination of the two works really well, because in order to do what you want in the area control portion of the game, you have to bid well. In order to bid well, you have to do well in the area control portion of the game, so you have that recurring income, the recurring revenue. So you're playing this balance of you have to do well at this in order to do well at this, which means you'll do better at that, and then you can do better at that. And yes, there's a little bit of a catch-up mechanic at play, as well as a bit of a gang up on the leader kind of situation that makes the game still balanced even when players are potentially outperforming. It's a fun game. I love the bidding. I love the combination of the two. The fact that I can sit there and outthink other players of bluff that I'm going here, and then you'll call my bluff and let me stay there. You'll let me stay on the track that I didn't want to stay on. It is so much fun when that happens. I love Cyclades, and no other game in my collection, no area control experience gives me quite the same unique feeling. I can see other games. I can see Blood Rage being replaced by another game. But something about Cyclades works really well. And yes, by the way, there is also a second edition that's going to be on the works on this. Not from Matago, but Bruno Catala is working on this one again, a second edition. And again, if that's the one that stays, it still counts. It still counts. Number 3 is going to be Codenames. And any version of Codenames will do, although I imagine Codenames Duet is going to be the one that stays the longest. Codenames Duet is a delightful little experience, and it's an experience that I particularly enjoy. Now, obviously, Codenames Duet is going to be set 2. If you factor any version of Codenames, then that gives me more variability. But either way, Codenames Duet on its own, even accounting for the fact that the primary person I play this with is my wife, although I've also started playing with my daughter as well. But even if I just play this with my wife, even if I just played it 2 players, Codenames Duet would stay forever. This is a game that my wife and I played in the hospital when we had our youngest child 2 years ago. When we were in the hospital, we had this game and we sat there and played like 20 games of Codenames in the hospital bed. And no, it's not me who asked to play this game. I'm always down for a game, don't get me wrong, but I'm not the crazy husband who's like, now that you had a baby, let's go ahead and play games in the hospital bed. No. For that to happen, my wife has to be the one to request it. I can't be like, hey, congratulations on having that little like child cut out of your body, but I need you to play so I can get my fix. There's a limit to how abusive anyone can be, but Codenames Duet is delightful. In fact, particularly going back to that instant, I remember one of the clues we still remember to this day, we keep bringing up, is there was Joan of Arc and cow on the table, and she said stake 2, and yes, I got that clue. Stake 2. It was beautiful. It was delightful. It was so rewarding. She laughed. It hurt because she's not allowed. You're not supposed to laugh after having a C-section. It causes hurt and pain, so it was the most painful clue she ever gave, but it really worked and it was enjoyable. But either way, Codenames Duet is a game that is consistently one of our favorite games to pull out and just play as a couple. I don't see anything replacing that as far as a 2-player party game. 2-player party games aren't that common. 2-player games are very common. 2-player party games are a little harder and rarer in terms of what they do, and yet Codenames Duet fits that spot. So when my wife and I want to play a game and we want something short and easy, light and breezy, rhyming intentionally, Codenames Duet fills that slot. And that's why it's on my list. My number 2 is going to be the Castles of Burgundy. The Castles of Burgundy, the newer edition this time around, but I have everything upgraded in here. I have what do I have in here? I have a broken token insert. I have upgraded little tokens and the workers and the mining chips, whatever it is. I have everything upgraded. I think I've upgraded coins too. I don't know. I have it all upgraded. I've had this game in my collection. This is amongst the first games I ever bought. When I first bought games, like when I first sat there, I was like got into the hobby and I made a purchase online and I got a stack of games. Most of those have left by now. There's 2 that are left. Seven Wonders and Castles of Burgundy, meaning this is going to be the longest game in my collection. One of these days, I'll do another video, another list of the top 10 oldest games in my collection. And spoiler, Seven Wonders and Castles of Burgundy are going to be on that list. Now, Seven Wonders is not on this list, to be clear. I love Seven Wonders. I find it immensely enjoyable. But it's a little lighter and a little bit more repetitive in ways that I don't know if it will stay forever. Probably will, but not enough to put on this list. But Castles of Burgundy, on the other hand, 9 years down the road, I think it's 9 years now, 2012, 21, yeah, 9 years later, this game is still rewarding. 9 years later, this game is still fun. 9 years later, every single time I am weighing up one heavy euro against another heavy euro, the Castle of Burgundy will always win for me. It has stood the test of time. It is good at multiple player counts. It has a decent amount of variability. Decent enough that I have all the expansions for it, and I haven't utilized them all because I just don't feel the need to. I have a few of them that I mixed in, but going through all the expansions, I just don't feel the need to do that. I usually just throw in the extra buildings, extra tiles, and there's modules and trade routes and all these other things. I'll get to them if I ever really need to. It's a game that I don't play all the time. I play it maybe 2-3 times a year, but they're fun plays. Consistently. Every single time. And I don't have to remember the rules. I just set it up, get ready to go, and I play the Castles of Burgundy. And the number one game on this list, we'll have to figure out how we're positioning everything here, shove this off to the side. The number one game on this list is the very first game that I put on this list. It's the very first one. As soon as I was thinking through what makes this list, it was going to be Terraforming Mars. Terraforming Mars hits multiple of the notes I'm looking for. It plays well at multiple player counts, specifically at 1, 2, and 3 players. 4 is where I'd rather not play it. It has solo play as well, which is always a good factor. Anything that has good solo play has a better chance of hitting the list, because good solo play means I could lose all the people who are playing games with me and I'd still want to play it. This is a game that I do play solo and I do play it multiplayer, and I still enjoy it both ways. It has variability through the roof. I have multiple expansions, some that I've incorporated, some that I've never played because I don't feel the need to. There's so much content for this game, so much stuff. I've deluxeified it to death as much as I possibly can with this big box and everything I get in here. The one major strike it does have against it compared to what I'm looking for in this criteria, and it has longevity as well. It's been in my collection for 4 or 5 years now, and it keeps getting better every time I play it. But one of the major strikes it does have is going to be the accessibility. As a multiplayer 3-player experience, it's going to be a game that tends to run us 3 hours plus to play. And I know I always get comments saying, how are you playing at 3 hours plus? First of all, we draft. Second of all, we take our time. We have fun. I don't know why it does. It takes us 3 hours to play this game. Although if you're playing with Turmoil, it takes you longer than that. So don't play with Turmoil. And yes, we're playing with Prelude as well. I love Terraforming Mars. It is an incredible experience. It is variable. It is different. It is fun. It is amazing. It is so ridiculously good. And if I had to make a guess as far as whether it'll ever leave my collection, my guess is that it won't. But yeah, that's going to be this list. These are the top 10 with 3 sort of not on the list, but adjacent, of games that I don't think are ever leaving my collection. And as I said before, there are no guarantees. I look at a game, any of these games, and I think that it's not KonMari, if it doesn't give me joy, if it's not the game, if it doesn't spark joy, if it's not the game that I want to pull off the shelf, if there's something else that replaces it that does it better, then yeah, these aren't safe either. Until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. Hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, have a good one.